October 13th, the year 2000, lap 32, Texas Motor Speedway. Two trucks slow after getting out of shape in turn 4. Closing fast, a third truck tries to squeeze through a hole that's not quite big enough. And then, impact. The window net stays up, and silence on the team's radio is deafening. Its driver is pronounced dead late the following morning. In any other era, the accident would have been considered an isolated tragedy. But this was the year 2000, a cursed year that seemed on the verge of tearing NASCAR apart. An accident in May claimed the life of Adam Petty, a budding Busch Series star. 8 weeks later to the day, Winston Cup driver Kenny Irwin died. And now, Tony Roper in a Craftsman Truck Series event. 3 fatalities, one in each of NASCAR's 3 national touring divisions. Roper was not the most famous or successful of the 5 drivers who would be lost in the years 2000 and 2001. That doesn't matter. Remember the name Tony Roper. To his friends and family, his loss was every bit as tragic as any of the others, up to and including the iconic 7-time Winston Cup champion, inaugural inductee into the NASCAR Hall of Fame, Dale Earnhardt. Tony Roper was born into a racing family. His father, Dean, won 3 straight USAC stock car championships in the early 1980s, and he'd also run ARCA and a few Winston Cup events at Daytona and Talladega over the course of his career. Tony and his future wife, Michelle, met in 1990, not long after the young Roper started his own racing journey. This is the man she knew.
Tony was very driven. He was very compassionate, very loving, very hardworking. He loved his family, and he loved me, and he loved what he did. He thoroughly enjoyed every aspect of racing. I can honestly say that Tony was liked by everybody. He had a big smile and a big heart, and he was just he loved unconditionally, and he always put his best forward, which is what stole me from the beginning, was because he always did his best.
Like Tony Roper, Tony Raines cut his racing teeth in the Midwest. They met when Raines' team pitted Roper during an all-pro event at I-70 Speedway in Odessa, Missouri. And you know the stereotype about mechanics and racers always having grease under their fingernails? That was not Tony Roper, at least not according to Raines.
I say the clean. I know that sounds like a weird statement, but when he is working, he's always wearing gloves. He was never dirty like
Really?
Like me. I'd get everything all over me. I'm just going nuts, and I just remember that he was just always clean.
That way the whole race.
Raines raced his way to the 1996 American Speed Association Championship, while Roper wound up 10th in the division's final point standings that year. Both then went Craftsman Truck Series racing the following season in 1997. Raines with team owner Kurt Rohrig, and Roper with Bob Brevac. Even though he had made it to one of NASCAR's top 3 national touring divisions, Tony wasn't yet able to just show up at the track and race.
It was a lot of hard work, because a lot of people didn't realize that most of those teams that weren't your number 1 or number 2 week in and week out and had some backing, that their drivers did a lot of the work. And Tony, when we moved here, he worked in the shop every day, and he raced every weekend, trying to get the truck series start going.
Raines and his wife Sue moved into a house in Concord, North Carolina, not too far from Charlotte Motor Speedway. When Tony and Michelle visited the Raineses, they decided they liked the neighborhood as well. And it wasn't long before they moved in across the street, 3 houses down. The couples did life together, impromptu meals, holidays so far away from their homes in Missouri, and yard work. One time, the Tonys, Tony Roper and Tony Raines, were clearing brush when they came this close to demolishing an expensive and rented wood chipper.
I think the fear of 2 guys that barely had 2 nickels to rub together tearing up something that cost $12,000, we were like, oh no, we were jamming wood in it so fast it got clogged up, and we thought it had blown up or broke. And so we started investigating. Ended up it was just clogged, so full. But we took it apart and got it all cleaned out and got it back together and going. And we were like so relieved. It was a big relief. But I was joking about how messy I could be and how clean he was, so I was covered in wood chips, and I think he was supervising more than he was actually working, but we got it fixed, and got it all done.
Roper caught a huge break in early 1998 when he landed a ride with legendary IndyCar driver Bobby Rahal, who was fielding a truck entry with partner Tom Gloy. Roper scored a second-place finish at Indianapolis Raceway Park, but got shut out of a post-race interview on ESPN's broadcast of the event. MRN, they were able to catch up with Tony.
Tony Roper, best run ever in the Truck Series.
It sure was, and I owe it all to this Ice House crew. They made a great decision not to pit for tires and fuel the last time we knew we could go on fuel. And, the old Ford wasn't running bad. It wasn't great. We weren't really a top 5 truck, but the team made it a top 5 truck, and I just drove the heck out of it there at the end. Really thought that maybe the way that Sprague was really loose and sliding up in the middle of the corner, I thought maybe if our tires would cool off and I could get a run at him, maybe I could get him there at the end. But he was really strong on the restart, and we'll take second place. We're really tickled with this. This team is got a long way to go yet, but this is a great starter for us, and I'm excited. And I just want to thank Ice House and Ford and everybody that believes in me. I mean, the people that believe in me are the ones that I really thank for this.
How about the decision to gamble on the tires here?
Before the race, I told the team, I said, track position is essential here because it's really a one-lane racetrack. New tires is the only way you can pass on the bottom, and hey, they made the decision. They said, hey, let's stay out. I'm glad they did, and we made some spots. We were actually a little quicker than a couple of trucks in front of us, and I don't know what happened between the 24 and the 16. I think that was just hard racing. I think both of them were just trying to win. They're trying to win a championship, and they're great race drivers. I'm really proud to be up there right behind them.
Next came a move to the Busch Series in 1999, driving for Express Motorsports. Roper began the 2000 Busch Series season with Washington Irving Motorsports, a team owned by NBA Hall of Fame legend Julius Dr. J. Irving and former NFL running back Joe Washington. The ride did not pan out. It was at that point when Tony and Michelle began to consider all of their options in racing.
He knew after not making several races with the Dr. Pepper car that, things were probably going to be coming to an end with them. And again, that's when we, started talking about him potentially looking another avenue of staying in NASCAR because that was what he wanted to do. That was his life, and if he didn't feel that if he was going to be able to make it driving, that he wanted to still be a part of that. And the next best thing was going to be a crew chief. And he really understood the cars, the trucks. I think that that would have been his next move when he was realizing that, this was the driving aspect was not panning out to what he had hoped for.
Before following through on any of those plans, Tony teamed up with truck owner Mike Mittler and made 3 starts with the team. Before leaving for the October 13th truck race at Texas, Roper did some yard work around the house in Concord. At the track the day of the Texas race, he and Michelle enjoyed some quality time together.
We had a couple days and was working on a wall there at the house that I had wanted on the outside and just going over some things, had worked together. And, we flew out to Texas. We had some time together. We went and had breakfast that morning. His dad brought the motorhome down. Of course, that's where I was. And, the first time all year, Tony had came to the motorhome and we had lunch together. And he laid down on the sofa and on my lap. And, we just enjoyed some time together, which typically didn't happen at the racetrack.
The Ropers were working on another project, one that they joked about as Tony strapped into his red Ford race truck shortly before the Command fire engines.
The last thing, and this is jokingly, but it was serious for us because we were trying to have a child. As we were strapping him in, we were like, okay, now protect all the jewels and all of this, and we were laughing about it. And it's, we said, I love you. And the next, 15 minutes, it was a completely different.
10 machines piled up in a multi-truck accident on just the second lap of the race. But after starting 15th, Tony somehow managed to escape unscathed. On lap 32, he was not as fortunate. Steve Grissom was nudged ever so slightly by Derek Cope coming off turn 4, with Rick Ware to the inside. As Grissom and Ware slowed side by side coming off the fourth turn, Tony Roper attempted to dart between them. Contact with Grissom's truck, fielded ironically enough by Petty Enterprises, sent Roper nearly head-on into the outside retaining wall. Mark Petty, Adam's second cousin, dove into the infield grass to miss the accident. As emergency workers got Tony out of his mangled truck, Michelle's training as a nurse kicked in.
I remember a lot of people not understanding that I wasn't hysterical and asking me, but I was an ER ICU nurse, and I knew that they needed to do what they needed to do. And from having that background, you didn't need a wife or a parent or somebody being hysterical. And I remember Jim Cody being there as the chaplain, and he just came and got me. And when we knew that Tony was being flown out from Texas, he put me in the car. I asked for a Bible, I opened up to the verse, and we went to the hospital where we spent the next 24 hours getting the 3 different tests to conclude that he was brain dead. So it's as real to me as today is. Seems like forever ago, but seems like it was yesterday.
Although her emotions were in check, Michelle Roper was never allowed to see her husband in the Enfield Medical Center. She would not have known he was being flown to Parkland Memorial Hospital in Dallas had team owner Mike Mittler not seen him being loaded into the helicopter. Just 13 minutes passed from the time Roper's ambulance arrived at the care center until he was placed in the helicopter. Given the nightmare unfolding around Michelle, those 13 minutes must have seemed like 13 years. Once at Parkland, she still faced a difficult wait for information on her husband's condition. Michelle would later call on NASCAR to establish a dedicated crisis management team to ensure such oversights never happened again. Back in May, Tony Raines had been on the track in New Hampshire at the time of Adam Petty's accident and saw the destroyed car as it came to a rest. In the 1980s, he'd helped Bobby Allison with his short track program and had worked closely with Bobby's sons, Davey and Clifford. Tony Raines knew how hard this sport could be.
I was sitting at home watching it on TV, and my neighbor next door, his name was Pete Zimmerman, and Pete was a great neighbor. He knew the Ropers. We were watching the race, and the accident took place, and to be honest, I knew that it was bad. And a few minutes later, there was a knock on the door, and Pete walked in, and Pete was a very devout Christian. And he said, "Can I pray with you?" And I said, "Sure." So we prayed, and I just knew it wasn't going to make a difference. And I thought, it's hard to describe how you feel for so long, after that. So of course, there's a lot going on. He'd been to the hospital and everything was following the due course there. And I remember sitting at the table the next morning, just waiting, and the phone rang. It was Michelle. And it was the first time I talked to her, and obviously it was bad. We had a tough road, long road, for a while. And we all supported each other, helped each other. And it was very difficult because it hit close to home.
It's peculiar the kinds of memories that sometimes crop up when it comes to such dreadful moments. Here's what comes to mind for Raines: his pet Shiba Inu dog, Sadie.
That evening we got back, we came, dropped some stuff off at the house, but everybody kept coming by the house, going down to Tony's house. And it was a little bit later that dog had run down to their house. And I just thought that was strange. Like, it knew everybody was coming by and everybody was down there. So it ran through the fence at our yard and showed up at their house. And I just felt like I wondered if the dog knew the heaviness, the sadness, and that everybody was there and it wanted to be there, because it was just a weird thing to me. I know it's kind of a weird story, but I feel like those are just little signs, because the dog never ran out of the yard. But when we were all down there, crying and holding each other and whatnot, the dog decides to show up like it wants to help.
Raines was driving for Base Motorsports at the time. And that summer, team owner Bill Baumgartner had watched as Tony Roper helped his physically challenged daughter Carrie climb aboard and ride a jet ski. After Roper's accident, Baumgartner flew friends and family to Roper's funeral in Missouri. He never charged anybody a dime. The day after Tony Roper died, Dale Earnhardt won the 76th and final race of his legendary NASCAR career in a thrilling come-from-behind charge to the front at Talladega. Michelle Roper remained in the sport for a time, doing pit tours and various hospitality events. Dean Roper, Tony's dad, had a fatal heart attack on August 18, 2001, while running an ARCA event in Springfield, Illinois. 3 weeks after that, Michelle's father lost a lengthy battle with cancer.
Losing the three most important men in my life in a 11-month time span was very difficult. And I really didn't know where I was going or what I was going to do. And looking back, 20 years later, I know that God had me wrapped in his arms and kept me moving forward.
Michelle is now remarried with 2 children. She's a sports mom, hustling from one tournament to the next. Life is good. She was one of the lucky ones. And Tony Raines, he just wants people to remember Tony Roper as he knew him. A clean freak, a competitor, a friend, and not just as a mere footnote in the 2 worst years NASCAR has ever known.
So, because I know the pain that comes with it, it's not just a few hours, it's months, it's years, of wishing that it didn't happen, what could have been different. And, like we talked yesterday, here was a guy that was just trying to hang on and scratch and claw and fight and work hard and he got a bad break, and it's like, it's just not fair. That's the way people see it. It's not fair that any of them passed away.
Next week on Firestorm, 2000, 2001, the years that forever changed NASCAR, we'll take a look back at the life and legend of the one and only Dale Earnhardt. Be sure to follow the Scene Vault podcast for commentary on each week's Firestorm episode, then check out Firestorm on either the Scene Vault feed or on its own dedicated feed on your favorite podcasting platform. And subscribe to our YouTube channel for the video version of each week's Firestorm episode.